Welcome and thank you. We've got our timer, which I know is going to go super fast, so we're going to jump right in. We're not going to do long intros, but I thought for the grounding purposes, given everybody's background and having such a different vantage point from everybody on the panel here, we just do a brief introduction. So, Jose, you want to just give a
Yes,
super
my
quick?
name is Jose Marin. I'm the co-founder and managing director of FJ Labs, which is a venture investor that focuses in what we understand very well, which is marketplaces. Previously to that, I've been the co-founder and serial entrepreneur of a couple of large online tech businesses that have dealt with a lot of the complexity of sorting out payments.
Excellent.
Hi, everyone. My name is Prakriti. I am responsible for all digital payments and e-commerce for Eastern Europe, Middle East, and Africa for MasterCard, and very excited to discuss today what's disrupting payments.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Castellano, and I head up payments and commerce for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I'm also the chair of JP Morgan's Middle East Bank located here in ADGM.
Wonderful, and a lot of great news coming out of JP.
Yes.
Well, so we have a wonderful disruptor, early stage investor. We have bank rails and we have card rails all on one panel. So wonderful. I think what I'd love to start off, maybe, Sarah, if you can talk to us a bit about bank rails, what's happening, what JP is doing, and especially in the region, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for the Middle East because there's so much growth here and JP Morgan wants to be absolutely a part of it. But the payments business is completely evolving. And we saw in the previous presentation, cashless societies are becoming real. And from our perspective, one of the things, and I think the title we were discussing is fintechs versus banks, I look at it as a single ecosystem. It's not a bank versus a fintech. It's how can we collaborate together to bring the ultimate best experience to our underlying customers, whether that customer is a two-legged person on the street or a big corporation that wants to move money cross-border. That's where we play a role. And what's so important to us here in UAE, and particularly in the ADGM, is helping fintechs as they grow and manage their treasury business. So creating in-house banks, using things like virtual accounts to really drive centralization across the GCC is an extremely important adventure for us. And also we believe that the idea of having a lot of local bank accounts is really the time of the past, and technology has really been able to essentially digitalize cash management, and we're excited to be part of that journey.
Well, sorry, you bring forward a great point. I think we're going to pull on that thread a bit throughout the panel, kind of the fintech versus the bank processors, mutually exclusive, working together. Prakriti, when we talk about e-commerce payments and one click and how seamless, maybe you can talk to us a bit about what's actually happening behind the scenes with all of that.
Sure. I'm actually going to build on something that Sarah said, which is banks versus fintechs or banks and fintechs. If you think about e-commerce, and within this region, 10 years ago, it was still quite nascent. And now we have come a long way in the development of e-commerce. We're all converging towards a customer experience, which is one click and which is completely seamless. And what goes behind it is a fairly complex value chain that has schemes, that has banks, that has fintechs on both sides, on the consumer side as well as the merchant side. And so we're seeing the ecosystem really evolve when all these parties are working together to bring simplicity, security, seamless experience for consumers and merchants. And I think collaboration is absolutely necessary to move in that direction. But the one thing that I would certainly say is that all innovation / disruption that will take place in the payments ecosystem as far as this region is concerned is certainly going to be towards enhancing access for consumers towards digital, as well as enhancing experiences of how consumers transact on e-commerce with the different payment methods that they may choose to.
So when you talk about that customer user experience and so seamless, everybody achieves, or that's part of their goal, how much collaboration are you really seeing on the back end at this point, or are you seeing it yet?
A lot of collaboration. I would say that the way we look at banks and schemes is we're good at running the infrastructure as well as providing the security and the protocols of processing payments. Where fintechs are really strong is coming and doing the innovation in the front end, for consumers or merchants to get the experiences that they want. That's where their strength lies. And so I think there's a huge complementarity in what each entity in the ecosystem does in a payments value chain. And certainly, I mean, we're seeing a tremendous amount of collaboration happening. We ourselves, as MasterCard, we collaborate with anywhere between 200 to 250 fintechs on an average across the world, right? So it's very significant to our business model to work together with fintechs, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Jose, big portfolio, lots of early stage investments. You're a bit of the disruptor. Agree, disagree? Where do you fall in this value chain of collaboration? Are you looking to displace your fellow panelists?
No, I mean, payments have been an integral part of the development of e-commerce and marketplaces, which is, where we focus on. When I started my first company, one of the biggest limitants to be able to make our business grow was that we didn't have the right payment structures. So, there's been continuous innovation and continuous change in the space. And I remember even since 20 years ago, everybody was saying, no, there's nothing else to do in payments because the large incumbents are the ones, that have the distribution, and it's going to be impossible, to disrupt that. The truth is that, some of these large incumbents play a very important role, but you also have structures that sometimes foster more or less innovation. So, example, in Latin America, a lot of the banks sometimes own the distribution of cards and the payments. So, they have not necessarily the right incentives, for someone external to come in and disrupt. It's actually very hard. But, you also see that new technologies continue to emerge all the time, and it allows you to do things that you were traditionally not habituated to do or not able to do. And I think that when you have large incumbent structures, it's sometimes harder to innovate because you don't have the right incentives for some entrepreneurs to come and join. Sometimes, it's very easy to say, hey, we're moving on this direction. We don't necessarily want to change the paradigm, and we want to continue to build on a world that we already control and dominate. So, we continue to see a lot of innovation in the payment space. And as investors, we always look for things that can actually be massively disruptive from the perspective of how we can use information and regulation to do things differently. And that doesn't mean there cannot be collaboration. I think there is, a lot of the big incumbents have paved the road, to be able to do a lot of the things that we do today. But it's also true that there's been a lot of large players that have decided to do things slightly different, operating under different paradigms, that have been incredibly successful. And I see a very strong trend of providing a much more customized approach to product into businesses. We like verticalization of services. So when we think about specific needs that you need for payments in marketplaces are not necessarily the same type of needs that you need in other sectors. And some of these sectors start to be big enough, to be able to, to sustain an enabler that is customized for the specific requirements.
A big enough marketplace indeed needed. Sarah, you and I have had this conversation a little bit previously. What's the reality? How much is really being disrupted, or how much is it really just being laid on to existing rails?
Yeah, the banks often already own the rails, and when we see new payment schemes coming up, like real-time payments in the US or real-time payments across the Middle East, it's those incumbents that have that direct connectivity and that are actually moving the underlying money, whether it's a bank transfer or it's the card schemes, that the pipes are already moving the money. It's what we're seeing is that innovation on the front end. And where the disruption is happening, it's saying, okay, well, we want to displace the card companies by sending an instant payment, but then you ultimately still have the card companies involved. And if I look at the US, JP Morgan actually partners with MasterCard for Pay by Bank. We give the rails. MasterCard essentially has the API infrastructure and the connection to the banks, so we can then give that offering. On top of that is where the fintechs play, where they can give a better UI UX experience, or on the back end where they can give better reporting on fraud monitoring, et cetera. But still, an enormous amount of moving money is sitting within the banks and the card processors.
Prakriti, would you agree that this owning some of the infrastructure is much more of a perhaps evolution than a revolution that's going to continue with the collaboration?
I think there's two sides to this, the disruption narrative.
That's why you're in the middle.
Exactly, I am in the middle. One part is, as payments companies and payments technology companies, as we like to call ourselves rather than schemes, we're and I would say as an industry, we're investing into multi-rail. We're not dreaming of a future where cards is going to be the be-all and end-all of everything. And we very much recognize that new payment methods are going to come in and disrupt the ecosystem. And to Sarah's point, that certainly is an area where payments technology companies have stepped into, like ourselves, driving account-based payments, open banking, partnership with mobile money operators. We're really touching non-card payments in a very big way, and it's a very, very conscious part of the strategy. The part which certainly is disruptive, I would say, for payment companies is anything that is regulatory driven and becomes non-participative in nature. So I think, Jose, you referred to regulations and the infrastructure. I think regulations, as long as they are democratic, i.e., allows everybody to participate in that particular flow, it is good because technology companies can come in and provide services and experiences. But we do know that across the globe there are regulations that will be prohibitive for global companies to operate in, and there will be a nationalistic flavor to some of those services, and we recognize that that is a real threat of disruption going forward. So yes, I mean, I think that we have to balance where we can make a difference through technology and partnerships, and where we have to navigate the murky waters and find the best suited place for ourselves within, let's say, a nationally favorable policy framework.
Maybe I'll stick with the murky waters for a moment as we close out here in our last 2 minutes. Maybe if each of you can close out with, where are we in the cycle and how far do we need to get, maybe to have a little bit of clarity in the waters?
I mean, in my case, I still feel that emerging markets or less developed markets can play a very interesting role in innovation in this cycle, because, I'm not a very big believer of regulation. I think regulation in the fintech space has to exist, but sometimes if it exists too early, it doesn't necessarily allow some of the companies to develop. So, when I started my career, there was no innovation coming from outside of the US. Today, we see that there's a lot of innovation in business models that are coming from outside. And I think that's going to continue because companies will have much more flexibility to do certain things before they get regulated. And I would just be thoughtful around not blocking that type of innovation, of development by regulating something too quickly, because otherwise you will not allow them to innovate. And I do think that there's different paradigms, that are going to be emerging, that are emerging, and they're going to continue to emerge, that are going to be very disruptive on companies that are going to be doing things utilizing technology, information, and resources that were not available before. And some of the systems that exist today were built on, previous infrastructure and information. So I do think that there's a lot of change that we're going to see, a lot of disruption. At the same time, I do think that some of the large incumbents will continue to play very important roles in making sure that some of these innovation stabilizes.
Prakriti?
Look, I think, I think, Jose, you've said it all. Just the only thing that I will add is we're still living in a world where 70-80% transactions are happening in cash. So as long as there is an opportunity to digitize economies, there is room for everyone. There's room for disruption, and it should disruption innovation. I mean, without that, I think the industry cannot progress. So I think that we're in a good trajectory, and we just need to work together to digitize more.
Sarah, you want to close us out?
I think we're nowhere near where we need to be. This session title is one click. We should be completely clickless. Everything should be embedded. Our biometrics should be paying for what we need. Our car should be telling us our coffee is ready. And there's so much more we can do to really embed transactions into your day-to-day in a seamless, no-click going forward.
So I'm going to make the suggestion we reserve the same panel next year. We'll just call it No Click, and we'll see how far we got.
That works.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Wonderful
you.
panel.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Great to be here.